Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Tech That Matter webcast. We have been doing Tech That Matter events for some time, but this is the first digital one. The goal of these events is to help our audience understand what is happening in verticals, like in the case of cybersecurity, and inspire action. Get people that they have knowledge to build. To drive action and inspire new startups, or enable you to think differently about the things that they are coming. We have a group of very experienced guests today to share their insights. And before I'll pass it on to our moderator today, Professor Varavarigou, let me say a few things about her. She's a professor at the School of Electrical and Computer Science of the National Technical University of Athens. She has degrees from NTUA and Stanford. She has been teaching in the US and here in Greece. Her expertise and experiences in cutting-edge technologies as cloud computing, multimedia content processing, semantic web, and more. Since 2019, she was elected as the chairwoman of the board of directors of EYDAP. So without further ado, let me pass it on to Dora to lead the event. Thank you, Dora. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Vasily. Thank you, everybody, for joining our webinar, Defending Cyberspace in the Post-COVID Connected and Automated World. We have with us today four distinguished speakers: Navy Captain Spiros Papageorgiou, Mr. Sotiris Karagiannis, Mr. Eldert Van Wijngaarden, and Dr. Jake Sotiriades, who will try to shade different shades of light on the issue today. Before giving the floor to our distinguished speakers, I would like to make a few opening remarks regarding the whole issue of cybersecurity in the post-COVID world. So it is true that during technology advancement, the typical household internet connections or simple small enterprise have become more secure from cyber attacks. And this is because simple internet setups are secure since the external nodes are only aware of only one single address in the internal network. However, the increasing use of cloud and remote file accessing generates new risks in that matter. For instance, due to the COVID-19 lockdown, the employees of a company who connect remotely to their office computer render the whole company vulnerable to cybersecurity attacks of session hijacking, possibly granting the attacker access to the company's entire network. Hence, although perimeter security used to be the main model for critical infrastructures to protect themselves against external attacks, today the model is no longer the appropriate one. The more connected people and infrastructures are, the more important it is to have processes that approach security as a whole. And this is because the surface of what we're trying to protect is increasing. Also, nowadays, holistic security approaches are necessary in both digital and physical dimensions. Understanding the risk factors is important, as technology and the social engineering dimensions contribute equally to the overall vulnerability of the infrastructures. Moreover, human interaction is of key importance in cybersecurity, since human vulnerability through social engineering is the more likely to generate the attack point than the software used. Also, one has to realize that the security and usability relation is orthogonal. And as a totally secure system cannot exist, a totally secure system is effectively becoming useless to the users. So one has to take into consideration these trade-offs between effectiveness, usability, and security. Take, for example, homogeneous networks that are easier to maintain, but are more susceptible to attacks than heterogeneous ones, which are safer due to the sophistication required to access every different part of the network. So here's an example of functionality easy to maintain versus protection. And same for advanced functionality and applications development and upgrades, increased total lines of code and hence are more exposed to cyber attacks as there is an increased possibility of finding a trapdoor in higher complexity. With all that in mind, post-attack actions are necessary and one should be prepared for recovery actions because disasters will certainly occur at some point of time in the future. For example, one can think about providing distributed mini data centers and backup centers for disaster recovery that are remotely located and not all connected in the same network. One last point is that going after trust, going after security, one might have to give up on trust, user privacy, and security. And then one should definitely exploit the trade-offs between security, data trust, and user privacy. So with the few points mentioned just now, I would like to give the floor to our first speaker, Navy Captain Spiros Papageorgiou, or Spiros Papageorgiou, who is Director of Cyber Defense Directorate of Greece. He is the Director of Military Computer Emergency Response Team and also the Director of the National Intelligence Service. He holds an MSc in Computer Science and has significant experience in computer and network security, in cyber defense, incident handling research and implementations, with a focus on red teaming, penetration testing, incident handling, digital forensics, and system and network security. He has been responsible for organizing and implementing the Hellenic National Cyber Defense Exercise, Panoptis, since 2010. His talk today will be about what is effective cybersecurity, cyber defense, and also proactive cyber defense. The floor is to you, dear Spiros.
Thank you very much, Dora. I will be very brief. I will present a few my experience regarding what is effective cyber defense and specific what is proactive cyber defense, because we know that defense is reactive, but what we can do more in order to change that to be both reactive and proactive. That's my main idea. So we have to have the principle of assume breached. What we mean with that? So John Chambers said there are two types of companies, those that have been hacked and those who don't know that they have been hacked. So for sure, we are hacked or we are gonna be hacked. We have to have that in mind. That's the first principle that we must have in mind. The other thing that there is different mentality between defenders and attackers. Defenders think in list, that means checklist, okay, I did that, but they don't focus on the cyber threat. On the other hand, the attackers think in graphs. That means he will always win. They will always win for sure. So we have to change our mentality, thinking like the attackers do. So what is the defender's mission? What we want as defenders, we want to detect and respond to cyber attacks on time and in-house. What I mean with that? By our own capabilities, by our own means. This implies that defenders, we as defenders, must understand tactics, techniques, procedures, and also the tools used by the attackers. Having that in mind, we can take the right measures covering the needs of our company or of our organization. So in order to respond to advanced threat protection in real time or near real time, the defenders must develop for sure cyber threat intelligence and also hunting capabilities. Those make the difference. Change the reactive cyber defense to proactive. So by exploiting cyber threat intelligence, we can work both proactively and reactively. So the message of these days, work both proactively and reactively regarding cyber defense. So we have to have in mind that there is no security without detection. There is no protection without reaction. And there is no effective reaction without cyber threat intelligence. So what is threat hunting? Threat hunting is a process of proactively and iteratively searching through our networks, our systems to detect and investigate advanced persistent threats that evade existing security and detection tools that already has compromised our system. So in other words, threat hunting is the leverage of information, that means cyber threat intelligence, to identify evidence of undetected, unknown compromise, unknown threat. That's that is threat hunting. So having an holistic approach in order to build an effective cybersecurity and cyber defense, in my opinion, we have to follow those tips. First of all, an organization has to have a good knowledge of their environment. So that means baselining network and host, understanding what happens in the network, and understanding the users, the capability of the users, and the capability of the experts. The other thing, understanding the threat. If you understand the threat, you can take the right measures. Otherwise, we will not succeed, we will not defend our networks. Another thing that we have to implement is a plan of user awareness. Align the organization to support security. That means the users also, because the user can be the weakest or the strongest link. It depends on us. If we train them well, then there will be the strongest link. The other thing, we have to make our experts all experts. So we have to have an updated training program. The other thing, layered preventive defenses. That means cybersecurity. We have to segment our networks, use all the technology, all the security mechanisms, all the security devices in a cyber defense in depth. The other thing, for sure, our system will be compromised. So we have to develop and we have to ready to use a cyber incident response plan to respond to a network or a system compromise. The other thing, okay, first thing, we have cybersecurity. So what about cyber defense? We have to build our cyber defense in depth by providing layered detective defenses. We can provide layered defenses on network perimeter, inside the network, on system perimeter, inside our systems, and also we will have to cover our applications. The other thing, build cyber threat intelligence. Through the cyber defense process, we can produce more knowledge, more intelligence that in the format of indicator of compromise can be shared with others. We have to do that. Having that, we can understand better the attackers, how they work. Okay, the other thing, we have to implement, let's say, exercises or assessments. That means vulnerability assessment, penetration test, and the most important, red versus blue team assessment. One question is this, okay, we say that there is no absolute security. There are a lot of different companies providing different security mechanisms, different procedures, different techniques, different tools, and we buy all of them. And the question is, are we secure? Are the defenders are experts in that level that can respond to any kind of attack? So to answer those questions, you have to implement red versus blue team assessments to evaluate, to assess the technology and the defenders. So changing from reactive to proactive cyber defense, we have to have a proactive cyber threat hunting team. What do we mean with that? The defenders, they always stay in front of a screen and waiting for an alarm, for an indication that our system has compromised. Yeah, it stays without doing something. So the idea is collecting information, taking information from others, collecting information from our systems, to always search for the unknown threat. By having in mind how the attackers work, we can search inside our networks and searching for the unknown threat. That is proactive cyber threat hunting. Okay, and the last one, I'm always telling that a country will win a cyber war if it has the better disaster recovery plan. So we have a specific team and a specific disaster recovery plan. Otherwise, we will not succeed. So finishing my presentation, my idea is to work both reactively and proactively, share cyber threat information at organizational, national, and international level. That's the only way to go close to the attackers, to understand how they work. By understanding how to work, we can defend ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Spiros. I think that the questions are already building up for you, but I propose to go to our second speaker, Mr. Sotiris Karagiannis, who is the Chief Innovation Officer of Space Hellas. He holds a degree in Artificial Intelligence and Computer Science from the University of Edinburgh. And in his 30 years career in information technology, he has been an early internet entrepreneur. He has held senior management executive positions and was a pioneer in designing and implementing software as a service and cloud enterprise solutions on application monitoring and cybersecurity intelligence systems. He is also mentoring and advising technology startups in Europe and Silicon Valley on artificial intelligence, on machine learning and blockchain, and their impact on the future of work. His talk today will be on uncovering blind spots in future digital risks and the role of artificial intelligence. Dear Sotiris, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here, and congratulations on the event. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if I can do that, and if you can see the. Can you see the screen now?
Yes.
All right. So the idea is of how we are going to uncover our blind spots in digital risks that have not been here yet. So more or less a predictive approach on that, and the role of artificial intelligence. And I'm going to briefly talk about, just one slide about who is Space Hellas. Space Hellas is the top Hellenic and multinational digital integrator. And we offer a broad portfolio of products and value-added solutions and services. Some of them are directed towards the top of the market here in Greece and the region. And security, information security and compliance and security systems are some of them, which is really very powerful. It's a very powerful area of expertise nowadays. So that slide was like how we are today, but it's now yesterday. It's before COVID. So I'm going to talk about more or less the complexity of this of how the world is operating today, because big tech is already central to people's lives, which means we all use some kind of technology, either in our phones or cars or houses or whatever, in our companies. And the boundaries have been blurred between online and offline. It's after the COVID, it's actually not only after the COVID, but the latest years, we've seen a huge number of internet-enabled devices and sensors. Everything is now smart in our homes and companies. And in fact, smartphones and applications have more, have gone more into deeper into blurring the boundaries between work and home life, which is something we already felt after the COVID pandemic. So threats are now everywhere. And it's not only the perimeter, as Dora said, and they are complex. They're not simple. Artificial intelligence also is already introducing more threats in the sense, and opportunities, of course, in the sense that it's producing more data. Data that is not the raw data that uses to come out from sensors, but it's also data that comes out of algorithms and processes managed by artificial intelligence. Of course, encryption is evolving also, and that's pushed by privacy needs and corporate government protection that makes things at some points makes it better, and it also makes it worse. So what would the future hold after COVID? It's one thing is for sure that science and technology will transform the way we live our lives. And it's said that COVID accelerated pace of innovation by 5 years, others say more, or globally. And we see an exponential growth in data, which brings huge challenges in the information security area. And of course, at a scale never before seen in human history. That means complexity as different technologies converge and interact and enable each other is huge. Now, we're also introducing more automation of processes and roles, and some of them are not able to give back immediate results in terms of how they're actually, the explanation of how the algorithms are thinking. And of course, artificial intelligence are top priorities globally by nations and by governments and by companies. So at the end, AI is going to be empowering ordinary people to use technology to do extraordinary things. And this means that they're going to do extraordinary good things and maybe extraordinary bad things. So if we take one thing about the communication, how it evolved massively in 2020, we saw remote work, which is kind of one perception of this is telemessaging, group messaging, video audio for consumers, enterprise, government agents. Everybody is using, who would say it's enterprise social networks plus or on steroids. Everybody is using some type of messaging application now. Teams, Zoom, WebEx, Messenger, WhatsApp. So this brought people together, of course, but this introduces a lot of complexity in the security and data sharing model. So more visual, more ephemeral, huge data set of images, videos, and data are now circulating all over the internet and the databases of providers. Of course, anonymity and privacy are used to force new ways of communicating in new platforms. That means that there have been a lot of platforms that take care about anonymity, but that also poses threats into how information is disseminated and how it's controlled. And the communication infrastructure is now an attack target. See what's happening all over the world when telecom operators are also a target, because attacking a telecom operator, attacking a communication infrastructure of even a nation or a country is something that will stop the country of operating. The same happens with utilities infrastructure, gas, oil, solar, electricity, everything behind that is digital. And if we attack digital infrastructure, we actually attack the nation's capability of operating. Of course, Industry 4, I mean, the next day in industry with IoT and stuff, is bringing processes that are prone to disruption by attackers. In the cryptography evolution, that's also a thing that changed all over these years. Extensively has been used by governments and companies to protect data. It's been used by individuals and groups to protect privacy, but also encryption protects sensitive data and also hides, enables bad actors to be hidden or to try to be hidden. And what we have here, we have quantum computing that will change current encryption technologies. It's actually yesterday something happened in the United States that says that a Bitcoin, like Andres has been reverse engineered or found by using quantum technology. I'm not sure if it's if it's real or something, but that brought down the cryptocurrency economy for let's say 20% or in one day. So cryptography is huge. It's a huge part of the evolution of the security industry, and we see also trends that we are going to see in the future visible risks, which now previously was invisible. So what about if a digital pandemic will be imminent? Finally, the data science and the AI drives the AI bandwagon, but it's actually all semantics and big data. So it's a ByteDance of all those things that we humans are not able to understand much of it, because it's in huge speeds and huge algorithms. So major issues exist about ethics and bias, but also hybrid human and machine organisms which can be attacked and defrauded. And that's us humans. We use technology so much every day that we're in a hybrid model with our phones. And the next slide, I'm going to just talk about some kind of technologies that are around for the past few years, and detection screening technologies for drugs, guns, explosives, and chemicals. These are sensors that can be defrauded also. Biometrics, facial recognition, heart rate. So all those technologies are able to are prone to attacks, and they operate on code really. At the end, and not they're not least, autonomous systems and robotics automation are actually more active in our lives. But then the connected and automated vehicle technologies are prone also to cybercrime, potentially allowing remote control of vehicles and stuff like this. Finally, the safe cities is the concept of actually what the cities and the countries have to do to protect their citizens. And they don't need also only to protect the networks, but it's a holistic approach of protecting also infrastructure networks like energy networks, transportation networks, water supply, and other public infrastructure, which means schools, parks, stadiums, and stuff like this. And it's not the network only that has the issue, is the correlation of those attack vectors that is interesting in detecting it. So, as we say, by the time you see the iceberg, it's too late. So it's actually what AI can do to predict what will happen and steer away from this problem. Artificial intelligence and big data will allow us to predict and automate contextual and semantic data, share the data between and investigation between stakeholders on a need-to-know basis, and on a preference of who needs to know what. And in short, the system it's not there yet, but might be doing the work of thousands of human security experts in minutes. So I'm closing this by allowing us to envision how the artificial cyber heroes will be, where they will predict, prevent, and reduce incidents, manage the threats, minimize reaction times, handle situations, and disseminate information via roles. Thank you very much, and passing the ball to...
Yeah, thank you, Sotiris. Back to me to pass it to Eldert. Thank you very much, Sotiris. I see a lot of questions that are popping up for you as well, but I want to present our third very distinguished speaker, Mr. Eldert Van Wijngaarden.
That's not easy.
Excuse me, sorry.
No, that's not an easy name.
Yeah, it's
outside
not.
of the Netherlands. Yeah.
Okay. And who is a senior executive and CEO of the WebIQ, an open source intelligence technology company offering a platform that provides law enforcement agencies the possibility to collect, analyze, and visualize big data from open and hidden sources. WebIQ is currently active in 31 countries and has proven to have a worldwide unique darknet service that supports law enforcement agencies in their fight against crime and generally criminal activities. During 2019, WebIQ entered financial markets to help fighting money laundering and fraud. And also, Eldert has been an advisor to the Dutch government on internet and social media trends and strategies. And today his talk will be how to prevent cybercrime using open source intelligence. The floor is yours, Eldert.
Yes, thank you very much. I will share my screen as well to have a short introduction of the company. And after that, some examples of prevention. So the basic concept of prevention of cybercrime, but all kinds of crime, amongst them child sexual abuse. So our company, our mission is to provide law enforcement, public services, financial institutions with the best open source intelligence tools. We have technology products, solutions, and in which there's also a lot of data involved. So we have some data sets ourselves that we provide to our customers and partners. And of course, privacy is very important. It's also something that takes a lot of time nowadays to engineer, let's say it like that, because you have to have the legal basis very much in place and all the protocols, etc., etc. But it's very important for all of us, I think, living here and using this technology. So there's still one type of crime very important to us. That's also how the company started. We try to fight together with our partners child sexual exploitation. So we invest a lot in that because it's very important for the kids and our future and their future. So in 31 countries, you already told everyone, Dora, so I can move on. We are based in a few cities and are part of the Space Hellas Group since 2017. So one of our partners is Europol, and they also use within their legal framework, of course, WebAQ data to use during cases in member states. And we're also involved in the GRACE project, which is focusing on having an architecture in place for Europe in which child sexual abuse can be fought in the right way. We are very inspired by the Swedish Queen. She is very much putting her efforts in her NGO, Childhood Foundation, to embrace initiatives in which child sexual abuse can be detected, which is not easy. We started the Libra project. It's kind of a nuclear material. Of course, you can't touch it, you can't download it. And we found out that we can scan remotely images without touching them and downloading them. So we have a very good insights at the moment, and we can talk a lot about that, but I won't at the moment. So if you look at what we are doing, preventing crime using open source intelligence. So if I look at the concept of doing that, you want to detect, intervene, and prevent in the ideal situation. So in time, you have a crime taking place, and very often the process now is engineered with law enforcement that after the crime there are all kind of alerts, reports, prosecution, police is there to investigate, etc., etc. But if you look at crime towards the crime taking place, there are a lot of phases. So we see the propaganda, recruiting, educating, and sourcing phase, and then there's the crime. If you look at how internet is involved in all of those areas, those phases of the process towards crime, you see the internet has a role. So if you look at propaganda, of course, if you look at terrorist crime, there's a lot of propaganda. People are recruiting people, other people with the same interest, let's say it like that. Also, for example, within child sexual abuse process, educating if it comes to explosives or other things is shared on the darknet, and sourcing, you can buy everything actually what you need and try to do that as anonymous as you would like. So in all those areas, there's the internet involved. And what we provide to our customers, for example, Safe City, also in Piraeus actually, is our tools and data to look at developments, for example, in propaganda and recruiting. Also used in the Netherlands a lot. If you look at groups of youngsters trying to riot, they communicate via Telegram. So if you have the possibility to have Telegram in a data set, which is updated continuously, you will see where they are moving, and you can prevent riots taking place because the police is at the right spot at the right time, for example. Looking at sourcing, like I said before, there's also data involved. If we look at our dark cloud, that includes a lot of data sets, amongst them the darknet markets, the black markets, as well as all kind of channels in which people communicate and organize. Law enforcement, public services, they are able to really have the information to prevent what is going on, what can be going on. So if you look at the first example, child sexual abuse, the whole process is quite straightforward. There's a demand, material is being made, it's sent out to and via all kind of networks, and the images are viewed, and re-victimization takes place with very much impact to the kids, of course. So if you want to go back in that process, what do you do? So you have the public reporting to all kind of hotlines that they see something. And of course, the hotlines start to investigate. You have Facebook and Google and Microsoft sending out reports to the same hotlines that try to analyze it, or to the law enforcement. We provide technique as well to prioritize that, because there are millions of them. I think in the Netherlands they have 30,000 a year, and the police has the possibility to really dig into 200 or 300 cases. So you have to prioritize, and you can use open source intelligence to prioritize, because you can have a look if this Facebook account is still alive, if this person is close to children, for example. So you can prioritize using the internet as an information source. We have a hashtag server developed so that ESPs providing their inventory images to the internet are able to check their inventory and take it out if there's a hit with a police list. And now we also started, like I said before, with the Queen of Sweden, Project Libras, to be able to proactively scan the internet and have signals in place and packages of information towards law enforcement. So this is one example. The other one, like Dora said as well, we started in the financial industry 2 years ago. At the moment, we are servicing a lot of insurance companies and some banks in the Netherlands. And what they do, for example, these are insurance companies, so they start to use open source intelligence, a risk engine that we have, to have a risk indication of someone onboarding, or some people having a claim on money because their car is crashed or whatever. So what we see now, that they use Google or they used their internal sources, and what we do thousands of times a day is automatically check if there's a risk involved in someone applying for an insurance. Looks a bit like this. So this is me with all my risk. So what you see is that at the moment I'm onboarding an insurance company. A check is done, for example, if I match risk terms, for example, drugs or prosecution office or whatever in the news, but not only in the news, also in social media, also on the darknet. And there's been made some kind of a map, as you can see on the right above, where it points out where my person was connected with geo spots on this world. So is there a combination with Madrid in this case, for example, and Eldert Van Wijngaarden on the internet? And that's an indicator, because people traveling a lot to gray listed places, they have a higher risk. So this is all used to have a risk score together with all kind of PEP lists and sanction lists, and it makes one risk score, and the insurance companies are able to prioritize the highest risk and have the data in place to dig into it if they want to, If not, the data is also vaporized. So that's very GDPR proof. It's a one-off investigation. If you decide it's not risky, so I can let this person on board, then it's moving on, and it doesn't take any time at all. So that's my very brief presentation with 2 examples, well, I give the floor back to you, Dora.
Thank you, Eldert. Thank you very much for this very nice presentation. Now I'm gonna go to our next speaker, Dr. Jake Sotiriades, who is a global futurist and expert in intelligence and geopolitical risk. Jake is the founder of the United States Air Force Strategic Foresight and Futures team, and advises senior leaders in building anticipatory thinking and breakthrough innovations. He has a PhD in political science and geopolitical features from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, a Master of Arts in International Affairs from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts, a Master's of Philosophy in Military Strategy from the US Air Force School of Advanced Air and Space Studies, a Master of Military Operational Art and Science from the Air Command and Staff College, and a Bachelor's of Art in International Studies from Norwich University. He works as a thought leader, and has been featured internationally in the National Interest, The Diplomat, Defense News, China-US Focus, Krisis Καθημερινή, the Middle East Institute, MIT Political Science News, the Futurist Institute, and the Future Today Institute. He is a regular speaker on strategic foresight, global affairs, and national security. His talk today will be on strategic foresight, embracing uncertainty in national security challenges. Thank you very much, Jake, for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dora. Thank you, everybody, for this kind invitation. It's a thrill to be with you. And I'll tell you what, just from these first panelists, I have learned so much already. So that's the best kind of forum. I'm just going to share my screen and make sure that you all can see my slides before we move on with the discussion here. Can you just confirm, Dora, that you can see the presentation?
Yes, we can see that. Right. Thank you very much.
What I want to talk about today, and really sort of link all of the topics together, is this idea of embracing uncertainty in national security, because that's really what we're talking about, even in defending cyberspace. We're never going to be able to remove uncertainty from national security, whether that's in the defense sector or that's now corporate security in the private sector. And I think, as my very distinguished colleagues have mentioned before in their presentations, what we're seeing today in the realm of cyberspace is that digital transformation has essentially made the entire world one big soft target. And so if that is being the case, how can we move forward through the digital transformation to actually figure out a way to question our assumptions today and move forward to build strategies that are effective in embracing uncertainty and addressing our challenges? So number one, are we asking the right questions? And a little bit of quick background, I'll step through this fairly quickly today, and we'll look forward to questions, is that in 2019, when I was founding the Air Force's Foresight and Futures team, there was actually a lot of resistance from a lot of the senior leadership because they couldn't understand the value proposition. But as soon as the pandemic hit, all of a sudden we became in very high demand because there was a lot of recognition that we needed this kind of capability. And we were asked a quick question about the pandemic. What would the second and third order effects of the pandemic be? But they wanted us in good bureaucratic fashion to answer it in 1 or 2 sentences. So I said, there's no way we can do that. That's impossible to do. Let's harness our network of futurist thinkers from around the globe and put together a real response that uses the power of strategic foresight and actually gets at the crux of those questions. So I point you to the quote from John F. Kennedy, because as we talk about this defending cyberspace today and where we are in this digital transformation, we're living in this unprecedented time where unfiltered opinions are just all over social media and the internet. And that's how disinformation and malign influence campaigns really get started. And so we have to get better at being uncomfortable with doing hard thinking about the future. So what is the value proposition as we talk about this? Why do we need futurists, and why is this related to what we're talking about with cyberspace? Well, number one, we trade in the currency of uncertainty and national security. That is our bread and butter. We cannot be resting on definitive conclusions or linear outcomes. So we've got to figure out a way to disrupt the status quo if we're going to figure out how we can navigate systems that aren't even programmed yet, or technologies that are being developed today that are going to eliminate jobs that we have right now, eliminate positions in national security architectures and infrastructures, and how are we imagining those new skill sets for the future? That's what keeps me up at night. I don't think we're doing a great job of doing that. So last year, one of the items that we attempted to address is this idea of connecting military forces, because we have lots of legacy platforms, not only in the US military, but globally. This is a phenomenon that we're seeing. We have to network antiquated military systems under a central architecture. And just as an example, if I'm talking to Dora today and I'm on a T-Mobile phone and she has a different cellular network and we couldn't talk, that's unacceptable for us in the 21st century. But what many people don't realize is that's how a lot of our military architecture is built today. We have systems that don't talk to each other. So that's one part of the problem, is networking our forces and making information ubiquitous. But that's only one half of the problem, and what I think we can talk about today, which is the cognitive deficit. How are we thinking about problems differently, and how are we preparing for the next pandemic, the next cyber crisis? For example, as we are talking today, we saw many companies here in the United States disrupted by we don't know yet if it's a cyber attack, but a disruption. And then we've of course seen what happened with Colonial Pipeline, which again becomes very quickly a national security issue in question. So we do this through what I call a cognitive operating system. And this is a roadmap for how I think we need to embrace futurist thinking. And it rests on three pillars. The first is understanding that things are really systemically based. We have to take this systems-based approach, which means no matter what your entity, if it's the military, if it's the banking, if it's the financial industry, if it's the medical industry, wherever it is in the private sector, there are issues occurring in the strategic environment that may seem far off today, but they will quickly come back and impact your core mission area. So we have to understand the interconnectivity of events so that we can glean those insights and then put them into action in our strategic plan, which takes me to the second point, which is questioning the status quo. Many of the reasons why we find ourselves in security dilemmas today, not only in the military, but in the private sector, is because we don't have a great way of questioning our assumptions. When everyone in a room agrees on one threat of the future or one vision of how the future could be different, that should be a red flag, and we should start being scared, because we know for a fact that we are not good at predicting the future. And let me say, when we talk about futurists and futurism, let me underscore, futurists do not predict the future. We actually adopt a maxim that says the future doesn't exist. There are many possible futures, and all of those futures are constantly in flux. So we have to find a way to innovate from the future by using the weak signals in today's strategic environment. The third pillar for this operating system is to embrace analytic complexity. And when I talk about analytic complexity, I don't mean that something is complicated. I mean that we have to embrace non-linearity. So we can't expect solutions from point A to point B in a nice linear process. We have to understand that we're going to look at multi-source causality of an issue and understand how different codependent variables come together to disrupt what we see as today's status quo. Until we can get better at doing this, not only in the military, but in general in the private sector as well, we're going to have a hard time navigating that uncertainty. So what have we done? And this is just a quick primer. If you haven't, my good friend and colleague, Dr. Richard Lum, has a nice book out called 4 Steps to the Future. And part of this process, not all of it, but part of it, based off of the University of Hawaii Manoa School of Futures Thinking, really is about taking the insights and lessons of the past, understanding how those issues are coming together today, and then building alternative futures so that we're prepared for any possible outcome. We saw last year, we've all lived through this, that we didn't have, we were not necessarily prepared to deal with the global upheaval of the pandemic. Now that we've sort of navigated through a lot of that, we need to be questioning, how can we prepare for the next one? What about XYZ scenario that we haven't thought of yet? Because we set into our comfort zones. And futurists, I always say this tongue in cheek, are actually closet historians, because they understand what has happened in the past and how they can interpret the signals of today and the emerging trends to build a visualization of how things might be different tomorrow. One of the things that we did, and I'll make this report available in a link at the end of the presentation, is bring together a group of global futurists, and we addressed the issue of cybersecurity and malign influence campaigns and disinformation specifically in this Global Futures report. And the report really seeks to disrupt how the defense establishment thinks about defense futures and national security. And so we look at 4 global scenarios of the world in 2035, with the source of disruption being the pandemic. But there are plenty of other areas, like I mentioned before, malign influence, disinformation, and competition across a range of areas such as space, the cyberspace domain, autonomous vehicles. There's something in there for everybody. There's also geopolitical events in there as well, like China's Belt and Road Initiative and new emerging political fault lines in the Middle East, which I think will be of interest to a lot of our European listeners today. So there are the sections, and I will make that report available at the end of this. But we've taken it to a next step, and I think this is where we want to leave off as we get into the Q&A. How are we imagining a tomorrow that's different than today? And if we are living in a 3D or really a 4D world, why are we still building one-dimensional products? So the futures report in paper form is one thing. We've taken the next step and partnered with leading tech companies here in the United States and futurist experts like Kathy Hackle to take our report into virtual reality. And so now, instead of presenting a report to senior defense leaders and saying, this is how the future could be different, we're giving them the opportunity to step into the future, quite literally, by living these scenarios. It's a fully immersive experience that allows them to see how these different scenarios could feel, could look, and changing their perceptions of the winners and losers in each of those scenarios as they look at their strategic planning. I think this is going to be a paradigm shift in how we envision leaders consuming information and then how they're going to make decisions in the future. And as we look at things like simulating what the effects of a cyberspace campaign could look like, or some refer to it as a cyber Pearl Harbor, these kinds of tools to visualize those second and third order effects are going to be quite important. So the future of futures, to sort of wrap things up here, I think is we're going to start seeing a lot more futurists, not only in government entities such as the military services, but I think you're going to see a lot more futurists in corporate C-suites, because we've been given this mental reset from the pandemic and these skill sets of strategic foresight. And I'll just point to one thing here at the Enterprise Forum. We really need to congratulate the Greek government for being very, very far out front on this, where the Hellenic government today has actually established a foresight team in the office that really emphasizes these kinds of skill sets in the future. And we're going to see, I think, a lot more of this in governments and corporations. And the question is, if we don't do this, what are the costs of inaction? Are we going to create a military, armed forces, corporate structure, you name it, that's digitally connected but cognitively irrelevant? I think that's an important question for us to consider. And so if you have any further questions, you can find the report online at that link, and happy to jump into the Q&A. It's such an honor again to be with you. Thank you so much for the kind invitation again.
Thank you very much, Jade. That was really nice, very inspiring. I want to, as we move now to the Q&A session, I would like to give the floor first to Eldert, as he has informed me that something popped up and he has to leave in 5 minutes or so. Eldert, are you still with us for the?
Yes.
Oh yes. Okay.
I'm still here. Yeah.
So going to the questions that I hear from the coming from the people that are following our webinar, There's a question on this open sourcing intelligence. And there's a feeling that open sourcing intelligence sounds like crowdsourcing. Can you elaborate a little more on the process and the advantages that it offers? How do you go about doing, sourcing from the open sources through crowdsourcing?
Yeah, crowdsourcing kind of sounds that it would be possible to influence the information as well. So that's of course always complicated, but that's why we also always in the services that we provide use the internet indicatively. So it's an indication, it's a risk score. And on the other hand, it is important to know that if you, for example, want to have an account in a bank in the financial industry, it's much easier to manipulate the algorithms in the bank because you know that you don't have to have people transferring money always 10 euros 20 times a day. All those kind of things to gray countries, etc., etc. So it's much easier to manipulate that than to manipulate the internet and to be not mentioned in the news or to be not reviewed by people that visited a shop that really doesn't exist, or to look at all the opinions that are out there. But of course, it's always it's a challenge to look at all those opinions and all that information and see if it's feasible and it's applicable, yes or no. So we use machine learning. I'm not allowed to call it AI from my AI team, which I always mention. Because they think it's much too trendy. So they are into machine learning. They always tell me, and they are very much into getting rid of all false positives. And that's not easy, but it's we managed to do that. I think up to now, if you look at the insurance companies. We have false positive rates of 10%, and with them using Google, it was 90%. So I think we're doing a great job, but still you have to be careful and also to have not the true positives left out, because that's it's also something. But the human intervention in that and decision in that is very important. So I think it helps, it informs, it gives you a clue, but never think it's the complete truth and someone is labeled wrongly. So that's important.
That's true. But also, while crowdsourcing, when you do open source intelligence, you have to be able to identify who is there to help you and who is there to fool you, right? Is that correct? And how do you go about it?
Yeah, but I think if you look at the amount of information that is there, it's like I said before, it's quite difficult to be able to manipulate that all the time. So it's there's enough information out there that you have to pick out, and you have to prioritize and see if it's applicable.
And then, of course, there's this question about anonymity.
Yeah.
And people are wondering what is the limits of your right to become to remain anonymous, and how should one handle the issues of privacy and anonymity.
Yeah, I think if you the example which I showed of fighting child sexual abuse. So there are areas in which, well, in a very concrete case, the Dutch National Police has court orders to be able to retrieve that information, because they know and they can prove that a lot is going on there. So that's the sequence. You have to have the legal basis before you start retrieving data. And then if you have the data, of course, people trading and sometimes selling, but mostly trading, providing child sexual abuse material, they want to stay anonymous. But well, the trick is to take them out of anonymity in the situation that they are a criminal, right? So I think anonymity is, yeah, it's also a bit overrated. I think if you look at I think anonymity is very important on the darknet, for example, in areas that where people communicate with each other from governments, from countries with governments that don't promote free speech. And we leave that as it is. So we have a strong focus not to be collecting data from China or elsewhere, because that's also part of the darknet. But we must realize ourselves that if you look at the darknet, perhaps 1% of all content is very used in a good way, and all the communication, 1% of all the communication is used in a good way, and we try to leave that, of course, but we don't have to not look at the 99% of well, quite disturbing activities because we want anonymity for 1%, right?
Okay, that's good. Thank you so much, Elder.
Yeah, sorry, I have to go.
Yeah, don't
thank
worry.
you very much for this, and nice to meet you all. And I'm sure we'll keep in touch. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
But now I want to go back to Spiros. And, you know, people are asking about the red versus blue team assessment and what the difference is, and also the list versus graphs. Lists are used for the defenders, graphs are used for the attackers. So how can you give some more information on this red versus blue team assessments and the graphs versus lists for the defenders?
Thank you very much for the question. Regarding what is the difference between red versus blue team assessment and penetration testing, the difference is that, okay, when we are doing penetration testing, the idea is to find as much as possible vulnerabilities and misconfigurations on our network. And that's the idea in a small period of time. But the other thing, doing red versus blue or perp teaming, it means that we work like the attackers do. We don't care to discover any vulnerability, all the vulnerabilities. We need to discover only one, and the idea is to test the organization detection and response capabilities. So when you have the question, am I secure? Can I detect any kind of attack? So you have to work red with blue together as a perp team, and that's the only way to be sure that you can manage to discover any kind of attack. There is other a specific matrix. It's called the attack matrix. It describes every known attacking technique. So as red teamer versus blue team, you have to take all those attacks and try it against your network. If you manage to detect and defend against all those attacks, then you are at good level. So the other thing, what we mean about having a list and versus a graph, the idea is, for the attacker's perspective, is to discover only one way, one vulnerability. If he manages to have access to our network or to visualize our network, he will find the weakest link. That's the way they are doing their job. But the defenders, the only way they are doing the job, they go, okay, I have to configure my firewall. Okay, let's do that. And they don't think about, okay, I have to configure that firewall in order to defend to a specific attack. That's the difference.
Okay, okay. I see. So you see the link of the defense line towards the possible attack that creates a graph. That's very nice. I want to go back to Sotiris now and say, I mean, we can use AI to defend ourselves. Do attackers use AI to attack us, Sotiris?
Yeah.
And then I want to ask Spiros the same question. Yeah, because he's moving his head.
I think
He wants to
attackers,
pick up the question.
thanks. I think attackers will use any possible system and method to attack, and this is their course. So if they find AI tools openly available, or like if they use third-party tools that provide AI to extract information and also give them context about and give them open source information that will be showing them blind spots, because this is the way that we have blind spots. They see the blind spot, they go and attack it. So if they find these things, you can be sure they're going to use AI. So AI is actually a tool here that can protect us and also be a tool for attackers. So it's not the good and the bad AI, it's a tool. For me, it's like that. So it's also important to understand that from both sides, either for red teams and the blue teams, or attackers and the defenders. It depends a lot on the context and the dissemination of information. So if, for example, I say something here, Jake, Spiros, myself, yourself, it will probably think different about it, because it's your context. It's a different context. You have a different background, knowledge or context, and then you're gonna translate it differently in your mind. Now, if we can actually start talking about it and exchanging this information, then the blind spot will be revealed. And this is something that AI can help us in at scale. Okay, so for this thing, we need information that we need tools that will disseminate the information. We need tools that will align us in the same context, and we also need tools that will not predict but show us the blind spots. And these tools can be more or less AI, not machine learning, because machine learning is actually seeing data, a lot of data and patterns and stuff like this. But the original AI we would say it depends on semantics, and semantics is something that the last few years was not like it was not has not evolved as much as deep learning and machine learning. So we're going back to this and now working on these semantics and graphs and stuff like this, technologies of AI that will allow us to share the knowledge and correlate the knowledge, not only do machine pattern matching.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Spiros, do you want to add something to that?
As let's say we accept that the attackers are a step ahead of us. So for sure, they will use artificial intelligence, because if we as defenders will use artificial intelligence, they must find a way to overcome that. So for sure, they will use artificial intelligence also. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now I want to go to Jake. And Jake, I want to ask you the question, how can we use the experience of the COVID-19's disruption and society's digital transformation to develop new ways of thinking about the future? And how is this changing the set of futures that are ahead of us that we have to navigate through?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it?
Okay.
No, I mean, I think that's exactly, what we're talking about in the defending in the cyberspace realm, and not, I think, as Spiro very well said, defending, attacking, right? What is becoming very blurred in that realm. And so I think one thing is clear moving forward, the uncertainty in the national security realm will never go away. So we have to stop trying to mitigate it, and we have to do a better job embracing it. But how do we do that? It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to actually do it. And so it starts really with what I talked about, which is right here in our own mind, and being able to challenge the status quo and assumptions, and frankly, bureaucracies and old think that are not going to serve us well in the future as we look at these challenges that we are just not prepared for. as we've talked about today, a lot of the technologies that are going to be the game changers in the future are advancing so much faster than the government bureaucracies that need to assume them and then use them. And this is so apparent in the cyber domain. I mean, just from a legalistic perspective, and the last thing I'll say is, questions of proportionality and what constitutes an actual attack, right, on sovereignty via cyberspace. I mean, we could have there are libraries filled with books on that. So I think developing more futures-based thinkers, both in our workforce, but also our leaders, our strategic leaders who need to make these decisions, I think is going to help as we educate the population towards building these aspirational futures that we need.
True, yeah. But when then in your presentation, you talked about this need to change the status quo, right? Today's status quo, and in order to incorporate new capabilities.
Yes.
How do you think this features-based thinking can help national security professionals question today's status quo, which is necessary in changing the mindset and leaping forward?
I think it's a really difficult thing to do because you're going into organizations or infrastructures, for example, in defense, that see themselves as successful. They don't want to be disrupted. They don't want to be told that their assumptions are wrong or incorrect. So it's one thing to just point out a problem. We have to also offer solutions and concrete steps to get there. And so I think one way that we can do that, number one, is figuring out, which sounds intuitive, what are the aspirational futures for our organization in a whole range of areas. And so what we do when we do this for the Defense Department is we look at a framework that we call STEEP. So we look at scientific, technological, economic, environmental, and political frameworks all together as one source of disruption instead of everything separate. And then we map out how those sources of disruption become emerging trends and then become actual signals for us to build out these alternative scenarios. And then we just ask the question, based off of your investments today, if this scenario were to happen, who are the winners and losers in that scenario? And then how would our organization respond? And if we can't respond, then we have a problem and we need to rethink about how our model is and rethink our assumptions. So it's not just going in and breaking glass, it's offering, I think, a way to get to those preferred futures that we want, but it starts with education. Yeah.
Well, actually, I see a question from the participants here about ransomware. But before going into that, I want to ask a question to Jake and to Sotiris. You mentioned before the need for interoperability, okay? Systems talking to each other, approaching at a systems level. And now we have this emerging new technology of 5G, relates a lot to information systems and all. But then is 5G built with cybersecurity in mind? Is 5G by design cyber secure? And is this technology that it is mature, it's been deployed already? Is it compatible with cybersecurity? And this is a question for Sotiris as well.
Yeah, thanks. Well, it's not my deep area of expertise, to be honest, but I suppose that 5G I assume that because it's actually built after so many things have happened in the communication industry in the previous years. Every such platform is actually designed with security in mind in the beginning. Now, while it's being worked and it's being used, a lot of vulnerabilities are being discovered and they are fixed. The thing that we have now is that everything seems to be, well, everything is actually software defined. And because it's software defined, it means that it has the benefits and the pros and cons of software. So in one sense, software is actually can have bugs and have vulnerabilities, but they can be fixed and they can have iterations. So that's my take about the 5G. And but when I was talking about interoperability, I was not talking in the closed sense only of networks and interoperability through platforms and services and stuff like this. I was also talking about interoperability between organizations, departments, and architectures in terms of human interoperability. So the information dissemination to pass from one organization, let's say, I'm not going to talk about Greek organization, I'm going to talk, let's say, NSA to FBI or to CIA or whatever. It needs to, you need to know who you're passing the information to, how fast you're passing, the context of the information, and a lot of other things. Now, it's not only in the network level, but it's also in the information level. And this is very difficult to be done today because we haven't invented yet the contextual matches of where everybody is actually aligned on what the risk is. And that's a very important thing, especially for national infrastructure security and other stuff, which involves not only machines and devices and networks, but also humans.
Yeah, but I mean, I ask this question because you mentioned that telecoms are the first clients for cyber security attacks.
It's natural, isn't it?
Yeah,
because they carry the information.
Talking about clients of cybersecurity attacks now, there's a question here that says, what about malware as a service or ransomware as a service? So you say, I want to attack Sotiris, and I go and find a partner. Actually, I heard the ransomware attack was in the Colonial Pipeline on the 7th of March. I was reading, did you read the news? It's a huge attack that was really serious about this huge cooperation of pipelines of transferring gas across the country. So, Spiros, how do you feel about malware as a service? Do you think this is a new threat?
It happens right now. If you go to the dark web, you can ask and you'll buy everything or anything. What I mean with that, if you need a malware that will bypass any kind of security, yeah, it's a matter of money. You can, right now, a specific company, he will buy, not sell, he will buy for 2.5 million a chain exploit in order to gain access to any Android device. So it's a matter of price. So it's happening right now. You can buy everything. There is a lot of, in the dark web, a group of attackers that can produce any kind of malware that you need. It covers all the needs. So the idea is all the attackers, they can work together, they talk to each other, they exchange capabilities and experience. As defenders, we have to do the same. It happens right now.
So I have another question for you, Sotiris, that is in the Q&A section here that says that reads, biological viruses and cyber viruses, could they increase the threat surface? So this is now seeing humans as biological and cyber entities, and in the near future, biology and technology will convolute and will come much more together and give rise to complex bio-cyber systems. Do you think that this will increase the threat surface, will make it even cybersecurity an even bigger problem?
Thanks. Before I answer this question, I'm going to tell you a very short story. Some 30 years ago, when a father came to me and said, shall I put the PC out of my son's room. I said, why? Because I don't want my son to have any virus, he said. That's a joke, but it's really because the education of when you listen to the word virus, you say, okay, is that a computer virus? Is it a human virus? Now, being serious now, we know that we're going towards a future that like with mRNA vaccines probably and other stuff, we're going to have programmable elements in biological weapons. And that means that this is going to change the attack surface, not in the network sense or the like the machines, but it's going to change the attack surface. So if, for example, anybody could find like an mRNA sequence, and then you can actually have a printer, and then you can print kind of a new vaccine, and then spread it through, I don't know, going into, I don't want to tell you going to the water and do it, like, because you're not going to like it, I know. But then this is something that bridges the risk between the physical world and the digital world. Okay, so I think that yes, it's going to be opening the attack surface, and it happened in the past. Biological weapons were already being used in the past. We remember the anthrax attacks and other attacks in the United States in circa 2001. But if we have the opportunity to, if attackers or malicious users have the opportunity to mix those two technologies, be sure that they're going to mix them. So that's why we have to have a like a foresight, not predict, but actually anticipate what's happening.
Yeah, and what Spiros said, assume breach mindset. Assume that we're gonna be attacked. Spiros, can you elaborate on that a bit? And after all this discussion, maybe
there is no absolute security. By having that in mind, so for sure, at some point we will be compromised. We have to accept that, and we have to work on that. And having that in mind, we have to build our defenses by assuming that at some point someone can be inside our network. That's the idea.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
I think that I read no more questions. Vasilis, do you have any more questions coming from the audience that I haven't read out? I want to thank you all for your enlightening presentations and this lively conversation. And I look forward to seeing you again in another.
Well, excuse me for interrupting, but before we go,
yes.
I would like to ask our, my colleagues a couple of questions.
Of course.
I don't know
sorry.
if we can do that. I would like Jake, with your expertise, and like you've seen a lot of things. Have you been? Would you like? I mean, how would you feel of actually serving also? Like the Greece, because you're of Greek origin, of course, and you speak Greek better than me. I know that you do. And with this expertise, how would you find this? Did you have any propositions in terms of actually helping the Greek military or Air Force?
So with regard to strategic foresight, you mean, Sotiris?
Yes, your area of expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what we want to do is, through the framework of alliances that we have via NATO now, is expand from our lessons learned of building our team and proliferating that knowledge throughout not only the Air Force, but different offices here within the government. And what I would suggest, if we're looking at, our partnership capacity for our allies and partners in Europe, which are, I mean, no question, indispensable to maintaining security and peace, for our alliance, is to really, I think, increase the amount of exchanges that take place, thought exchanges. Now, thankfully, that we can start traveling again. Zoom is great, but it's wonderful to be able to spend time and really build those human relationships. And I think if you just take, for example, because you asked specifically, about the Hellenic armed forces, I mean, there's so many scenarios and so many, I think, there's so much impressive human capital within the Greek ecosystem, whether that's the armed forces, whether that's, this young generation that probably is the most educated ever, that all speak multiple foreign languages, that have tech skill sets, and the vote of confidence, I think, that's been given now with all of this very impressive foreign investment that's coming in. And frankly, the vision, I think, the broader vision in the international community, and certainly here in the United States, of Greece being a source of regional stability and frankly, a source of solutions, is really important, because it's a difficult neighborhood that they're playing in, if you will. And so today, I think we need to have more foresight exchanges, more collaboration. And I think, to be very honest, it's something that, even though it was developed in the United States, frankly, after World War II, we've seen foresight and futures thinking sort of go, ebb and flow, if you will. And I think now we're living this, renewed interest in futures and foresight because of the pandemic. But what I want to make sure is that this is something that is enduring, and not just something that's, people are interested in for 5 minutes. And then, so what we've really been trying to do is make this part of our day-to-day operational culture. And so I think that that's something that we want to communicate and share with our allies and partners. All specifically, I think there's a natural structure within the NATO alliance to do that. And I think we're going to be able to do more of that moving forward. So, yeah.
If I may, Sotiri, if I may chime in, and I would like to add to your question to Jake. You mentioned that we have to embrace non-linearity, and all education is based on going from A to Z. Do you have any tips? I mean, we have people in the audience that may be looking to get into this idea across the board, not necessarily in strategic foresight, but in general. So what would be the tip?
Well, I mean, I think number one is you've got to be able to you have to start getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And what I mean by that is, we all have our comfort zone. We all have our main area of focus. But I think what we're really seeing, and what I'm trying to communicate through this Foresight initiative, is it isn't enough to just be, have very, very narrow knowledge in one area. You have to be able to expand that, and then see how you can fit into, different areas. Now we're talking about things, for example, in the military, things like multi-domain functionality and things like that. So, even within the armed forces, looking at things like, it's not enough to just do one job. You need to have, and this is where things like artificial intelligence are going to help us become a force multiplier, not just in the military, but, in every aspect of our society in the future. Because today, when we talk about artificial intelligence, I think most of us really mean automation. We're not seeing the full potential of what that really means. If we talk about, sort of an artificial general intelligence, which is a completely different proposition. And so I mentioned this before, but I'll say it again. For those that are, entering the workforce now, the jobs that are going to be around in the 2040s don't exist yet, right? And that shouldn't scare us. That's okay, right? And technology is not going to, this isn't a warning that we're going to lose jobs. We're not. We're going to create new jobs. So there's a misnomer out there that somehow, the digital transformation is going to create unemployment. I would submit it's the opposite. But we have to be able to prepare ourselves to, I think, be, as we say in the United States, a jack of all trades, and do a little bit more than just what our comfort zone allows us to do now.
Oh, I have more questions coming here. Greek public administration considers mostly any security measures on ICT system not as a protection and continuity measure, but as an obstacle in everyday's work. That's why they don't invest on it. What Greek NIS can do about that? I guess Spiros is the one to take this one. Yeah.
It's very difficult to protect ICT. Taking as an example, colonial pipeline. What happens to that network? Okay, someone managed to gain access, first, I believe, to IT network, and after that, having access to operational network. Having access to operational network, yeah, it's very difficult. After that, you have access to industrial control systems. So it costs a lot of money. There is solutions, but regarding NIS, the only thing that we provide to critical infrastructure, it's having a good security policy and having all the measures that will mitigate the risk. The only thing that we can do right now. That's all that we provided to critical infrastructure. The only thing that we can do right now. And we already did that.
Okay. Thank you, Spiros. Vasilis, do we have more time?
Depends on our guests, but I think we kept them alive, so we should get any other questions for the next round. So.
Okay, there's some also that are like to Mr. Papageorgiou. Can you participate in your red versus blue simulation? We'll get you in touch with this guy. Right? Volunteers here.
What is the difference? Okay.
Yeah.
It depends. It depends. We have some exercises that we have red team versus blue team. Yeah, you can participate on that. But when you make an assessment to an organization, you cannot participate on that. So for sure, we in our cyber defense, national cyber defense exercise PANOPTIS, we will have red versus blue. Yeah, and anyone can participate either on blue team or on red team.
Okay. And there's an idea on open source malware, but this, this is coming futuristic now. We talked about malware as a service, but open source.
Go on the GitHub. If you go on the GitHub, you can find a lot of open source malware.
Okay, that's good. Any closing remarks by any one of our speakers? Okay, then thank you all for participating, for your live presentations and discussion. And Vasilis, you have to take that up on setting up a nice conversation again on your channel here, technologies, so that we can follow up on what we said today.
Yes, thank you everybody. That was a great opportunity to kickstart Technologies That Matter series. We hope it's a good opportunity for our audience to understand the opportunities and challenges emerging technologies are bringing up, and as I said in the beginning, to inspire action. So your input was very valuable. The whole video will be on YouTube for people to revisit your points, and we are looking forward, maybe in a year's time, to do a physical Tech That Matter event and have you all there. Thank you all. Thank you for coming.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Everybody. Bye-bye.
Very much.
Thank you. It's been an honor. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.